Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Ike Love. I'm the author and creator of the blog, The Viable Alternative, which is a blog that talks about the insights and wisdom I received along my path of becoming a better, stronger version of myself. And if you want to read more about the site, you can go in the description here and click on the link, www.theviablealternative.com, where you can learn all about my own path and wisdom, and hopefully gain wisdom and insights for your own path in your own life. Anyway, the last video, this is part two, but the last video was the viable alternative key to your transformation. And I talked about the definition of viable alternative, but at the end of the video, I said that I was going to go and talk about my own life story and how I came to discover the viable alternative. And the story becomes relevant in my life around the seventh grade. The seventh grade, I was in middle school in a private school, and it was that year where everyone started becoming interested in the opposite sex. And everybody was interested before in previous years, but now people just didn't care. Nobody cared, and it was just like out in the open, and it was interesting because that year was where there started to be a sharp distinction, like a class system of sorts created, like a sharp distinction between the popular kids and the unpopular kids. And the popular kids were the ones that, were good looking. They, the guys were popular with the girls were popular with the guys. Everybody in that group went to all the parties together, and it was kind of like the groups of the haves. And the other side were the unpopular kids who didn't get invited to all the parties, were looked on with ridicule and scorn, and were basically made fun of and just shut out of, quote unquote, the good life. And to kill any suspense that you may be having, I was not part of the popular crowd. I was in the unpopular crowd, and I desperately wanted to be accepted by the popular crowd. So in my infinite and unbridled wisdom, I decided that I was going to follow them around. And, hopefully by me following them around, they will one day come around to accepting me. So I was sitting at that table at lunch, and my theory was this, is that I needed their permission for me to be cool. And so hopefully by them hanging around, someone will basically bestow the crown of like coolness on me, and therefore then I would have the right to be cool. And what got me to this theory also was because I had been in that school since the first grade. And there were kids who came in, along the years, and there were kids who came in that same year, seventh grade, and they were immediately accepted. And so I was just thinking, wow, so this guy just came to school, everybody thought he was cool, was immediately accepted. So now all I have to do is get accepted by them, and I will then be given the permission to be cool and have the life that they have. But to kill even more suspense, that wasn't the case. As I followed these kids around and sat at the lunch table and posed myself at the lunch table, the upper echelon of the popular kids, I guess this position was secure. So they basically felt sorry for me and kind of like tolerated me. But the kids who were, in the group who were lower levels of popularity, they basically made it very clear that I was not welcome there. They would tell me to go back to the loser table where I belonged. They would sometimes, they'll tell me I'm a loser and, stop trying to be cool and just like, just tell me all this stuff. And the thing of it is, I put up with it all. I barely tried to fight back and defend myself because I was afraid that, if I defended myself, it would kill my chances of being accepted by them. So I assumed the more docile I was, the less I fought for myself, the more likely it was that I'd be accepted by the group, and I didn't want to rock the boat. And so, I mean, that whole system they had at that grade, it reminds me of like Jim Crow in the South and the apartheid in South Africa. It really was that distinct in the sense that, so like if you were not cool, you were not allowed to do certain things. I remember like when there was a cool song out like on the radio and I'd start, sing the song, some of them would look at me in disgust and be like, stop trying to be cool. It's like, who do you think you are? Like, basically say I didn't have the right to sing a cool song. And then I remember like, even like bringing in shades, like sunglasses, shades into school and to wear around. And one of the popular kids basically demanding that like I lend it to him and so he can wear it the whole day. And when I said, no, they're mine, I'm not giving them to you the full whole day. I want to wear them. And he just looked at me in disgust and be like, in the sense of saying like, how dare you try and be cool and wear something cool like that? You're not cool enough to wear something like that. Just give it to me, someone who's more worthy of it. And they even tried to set me up with like the nerdiest girl in the grade. They basically, they tried to set me up with them as if like, it was like their duty to set me up with them and like put me in this box. And again, I said, no, I'm not like, I don't want to be with her. She's a nerd and I'm not into her, And basically speaking, even then they responded with disgust and be like, how dare you try and get out of the place we set for you? And when she asked me out to the school dance, because they all wanted me to take her to the school dance, I told her no. And they were like, you're just so mean. You're so mean. And like, with disgust, I said this without even considering the fact of how mean they were to me. And, there were times I tried to stand up for myself. And again, it was just completely squelched because they were like, how dare you stand up for yourself? You're not even cool enough to do that. And that was, a lot of like the 7th grade, it was, I talk about the illusion in the previous video. This was like the illusion. I had to get their permission to do whatever or be who I wanted to be. And I sought their permission. And so what even also made it even worse was that I started to develop acne at that age, which developed into severe cystic acne by the time I was 15 years old. But that didn't help my cause, having pimples in my face, And later on that year, I stopped following them around and found my own group of friends who also were cooler than me. They actually were invited to the popular kids' parties, even though I didn't hang out with them, but they liked me. They liked my personality, so I hung out with them. But again, it was just kind of like, they were still cool in me. And I just basically hated it. I hated my position, hated the fact that I was not considered popular. The following year in the 8th grade, I had my friends, but, it was just always said that, by them, oh, those are your only 2 friends and blah, blah, blah. And I just couldn't wait to get out of the school. I just saw the system there just so rigid. Like you couldn't even move up. You couldn't even enhance your social status. And I just wanted to be out. And so thankfully, I left the school. I went to a public high school. And even to this day, I'm so glad I never stayed there, But coming into public high school, like the first year and a half was kind of very similar to my years in private school. The only thing then was, even then, when I went through what I went through, I still was just glad to be out of that previous school. It was just, that school was just that bad. I just was just so happy to be away. Even though the first year and a half of the new school, I still kind of had similar situations, Um, so like, yeah, that was that. But like, starting, after the second half of my sophomore year in high school, I found my own group of friends. A lot of them, I'm still cool with them to this day. But, as I came to this school, I just was filled with like a lot of shame. I was just so embarrassed about the past. And then what made it worse was that I developed now at 15. I said I started having acne at 12, but at 15, I had severe cystic acne. Like I had the huge like pimples on my face, and even the dermatologist was like, "Wow, you're too young to have acne like this age." And on top of that was just constantly being told by people that I was ugly, and friends came up to me, "Well, that girl said you were ugly," and feeling just ashamed about that. And I just had a very, very low self-esteem. And thankfully at 16, my face cleared. But, I just generally, at age, obviously, everybody wants to be, if you're a guy and you're straight, you want to be popular with the ladies. But I had such a low self-esteem, I basically was terrified of women. To me, women were objects of shame who had the potential to make fun of you and crush your self-esteem. And my friends I had, again, they just seemed to like be much more comfortable in their skin. They seemed to be like, a lot more, had a more comfort with women, or the girls, women, ladies, whatever you want to say. At 15, I don't know whatever, ladies. And, I just felt like, shut out. And, a lot of women there treated me either ignored me or just treated me with an active indifference. And I was just so shy, I never said anything to them anyway. And like I said, my friends, I just felt like they all had the permission to be great. Like the world gave them the permission to be who they wanted to be, and that the world was shutting me out of that same permission. Like I was like a party was going on and I was shut out. And so, 16 came around. I said my face cleared. That year wasn't really that bad. I actually had my best year in high school was that year. But come around 17, in just thinking about how I was treated in the past, I was just filled with such shame that to cover the shame, I started becoming bitter and angry. My senior year, just first one, started becoming bitter, angry, and started depression started becoming a familiar bedfellow. So senior year ended, college came around, and I remember around when college started coming around. I remember one of my childhood. Well, let me just get into this. I'm sorry, I'm running around here. So college came around, and I had decided that, in the past, I was never really myself in school, but this time I was fully just going to be myself and just be fully expressing who I am. And for the first time in my life in school, I didn't have problems making friends. It was actually, it was quite easy for me to make friends, male friends. I still was completely terrible with women. And my friends of mine, again, were a lot cooler than me, as I saw them as a lot cooler than me. They were popular women. And I just started just to feel more and more sorry for myself, And one of my childhood friends I had, who I'd grown up with and known all my life, he was going through similar teenage angst as I did. And he was very hateful and would proclaim his hate towards people. And that was when the light bulb went off in my head, because he hated people. And I was like, wow, this guy hates people. And I just like, wow, I can hate people too. All my life, people hated me for whatever reason, actually for nothing, because I didn't do anything to them. But now, you know what, man, I'm going to hate them back. And now, for all those people who hurt me in the past, my revenge is to hate them all, the passion. And man, this hate thing, I took the ball and ran with it. Anybody who looked at me the wrong way, I hated them. Anybody who said anything to me that I didn't like, I hated them. Anybody I felt who didn't like me, I hated them. Took this hate thing and I just completely, utterly embraced it. It made me feel powerful. It was like this time now, instead of me being judged by others, I was judging you this time. Instead of me trying to trying to make people like me, I can just choose to hate you. I had the power this time. I wasn't a victim anymore of trying to be liked to people. I didn't even want you to like me anymore, because I can just hate you. And man, I just friggin', this hate thing to me was like the greatest thing since sliced bread. And also I remember with my friend, I remember just like, we were just so bitter and angry. We'd talk about like going to the park with hammers and attacking happy couples in the park. I mean, think about how insane I was, And, that year, like my freshman year in college, I started becoming depressed more and just getting more angry about life. And, I was a guy in pain, and the hate was used to hide the shame I felt, and the fact that I felt like a victim, even though hate makes you more of a victim. But anyway, I created these sociopathic sayings called ichisms. And they're these sayings of mine where I just lash out in anger towards the world. And one of my ichisms I remember was, hate people before they hate you. Another one was, I laugh at now, but think about someone saying that. Another one was like, when depressed or having a low self-esteem, make fun of or look down on others worse off than you so you can feel better about yourself. Another one was, if it's different than you, make fun of it. And these were just all sayings of mine to completely, utterly like hide my low self-esteem and like cover my low self-esteem by looking down on other people and hating people and just all this nonsense like that. And I even remember I would sit like, in varying ranges of sobriety, from stone cold sober in the dining halls in the dining halls, to being ravingly drunk at parties, preaching these ichisms with such fervor and passion, and people actually gathering around me to listen to them and laugh at them. And I guess they laughed and they thought it was so funny because I had such conviction in saying that. I just was so angry, and I was, and I even remember walking down the street and people were like, hey, can I get an ichism? And I'd say one in full anger and they'd walk away laughing, and just, but I was an angry bastard. I remember at certain times, I remember there was one, like it was like President's Day weekend. And, that was a long weekend in college. So even though there were parties, but I remember being so angry, I decided I didn't want to party with anybody. I just wanted to go home. So I remember, one of my friends was saying, yo, Ike, you're going to hang out and party. I was like, F everybody. I'm going home. F everybody. And then he'd be like, yo, bro, you should be more sociable. That's probably why, you're so angry. Socialize with me. I was like, F that one, everybody. I don't want to socialize with anybody. And I went back home to New York, and to be home, and just because me going home was like my big middle finger up to, like, the whole quote unquote the world who screwed me over. I remember other times like there were just certain weekends I didn't want to deal with people at all. And so, my friends would invite me to come out with them. And I was like, no, I hated people, and I'd sit in my room by myself, wishing that the ceiling of the party would collapse and kill everybody at the party. And I thought it was funny then, but now I look back and I was like, sheesh, goodness gracious. And so that was my general disposition, angry and bitter, and just, covering my pain. And, I just felt like the world has screwed me over. And another thing was that I just felt that nothing ever worked out for me. I mean, I just thought that I just got the worst out of life. And people would say to me, my mom would say, why don't you be more positive? And I was like, why don't I be positive when nothing positive happens to me? If something positive happened to me, I'll be positive. And my general attitude was that the world just screwed me over, that, I was put on this earth to be used as a laughing stock, and used by the gods to, like, like kick around and just, like, screw over. And, that was my general disposition. And so sophomore year came around, and I increasingly got more and more depressed. I was more and more cemented in my mind that, like, I was here for life to screw over. And I just started, spiraling into long bouts of depression until finally, like, the second half of my sophomore year, like towards like the middle of the second half of my sophomore year, I just went into this huge depression and just basically stopped going to class. I didn't care about myself anymore. And I was just lying all in bed all day, feel sorry for myself, and like sleep, basically. And it just became so intolerable and painful. I started thinking to myself that it was just time to kill myself and commit suicide. And I just said to myself that if I didn't feel better by a certain date, I was just going to end my life. And I started setting dates to my suicide, and even had the method planned out, how I was going to kill myself. And my roommate would be pleased. I would have given him a 4.0. You probably needed it. But I started thinking of really seriously killing myself. And my killing myself was going to be my big FU to the world and to the gods and everything like that who wanted to screw me over. It was basically saying, you know what? I'm not playing your game anymore because I'm leaving this world. You're not going to have to kick me out anymore, and screw you. I refuse to be your laughing stock. And so thankfully, I was in contact with my mom, and who was, my rock at this time. I didn't tell her about my suicide plans, but she suggested I go see a school psychologist, which I listened, and started going to the school psychologist. And, I was thinking I was kind of clinically depressed, but after like 2 sessions, he kind of laughed it off and was like, this is the age, this is the age where you're going to feel like this. This is, you're a young adult, ended puberty, whatever. And, you're going to be just fine. Now, I wanted him to prescribe to me Prozac, but, he didn't think I needed it, but he wanted to give it to me anyway. And so I started taking it, started feeling a little better. My grades were abysmal. And as the year ended, the school year ended, my grades were complete debacle, and it was already decided kind of that I was going to take a year and a half off and just kind of like get myself together. So, I went back home to New York and started hanging out with my college friends I met in college. I met them my freshman year, and some of them didn't continue into their sophomore year in psych college. But I started hanging out with my college friends and their friends, and between hanging out with them, I used to, things have changed now. But in New York, if you're a young male in your late teens, early 20s, the rite of passage, or I'll say the activity, was hanging out in the Ville, and meeting and talking to girls and going out clubbing and blah, blah, blah. That was a thing to do when you were a teenager in New York back in the day. And so I started hanging out with these, my friends and stuff like that, and just having a lot of fun. Had a lot of fun, and within the first 3 weeks of returning home, of hanging out with my friends, I started feeling a lot better. I guess the weather was, warmer, and being back home, that all helped to uplift my mood. And so I just stopped taking the depression meds. I realized I didn't need them anymore, but continued hanging out with my friends, and hanging out with them in the village, and just meeting different groups of people, hanging out with them, going to clubs, really like consistently for the first time. It started opening up my mind about life and the world. And one of the first things I noticed was that, first off, these friends I hung out with, like, I looked up to them. They were all good looking, they all dressed well, and they were all very successful with women, and smart. And so I looked up to them, and that was, that's how they were able to open my world. They were at a little higher level social than I was, so they were able to show me stuff that I were beyond my previous reality. So I noticed, though, about all of my friends was that each one of them had the success I wanted. They were all successful with ladies, but each of them had their own unique style, and their success turned up in a different way. It was like the success they had was unique to each one of them. And even the women they attracted were kind of different. They were all good looking, but they were still different. They had their own different style. And, one woman they attracted won't be into the other guy, and vice versa. So, like, I started to see their uniqueness, and how their uniqueness had manifested its own unique success. And a light bulb went off in my head, and I was like, wait a minute. They're all unique with their own unique success. I'm unique. That means I can have my own unique success. So I started becoming curious. It's like, what will my success turn up like? Like, what about me do I have within me that can make me successful? And if it does make me successful, what would it look like? And what will my success start to manifest as? What will my gifts start to look at? What will the successful Ike look like? And what will be the manifestation of that success? And I started to get inspired by that. And that's the first pillar of the viable alternative: self-realization. When I first realized my uniqueness, and my uniqueness can bring me my own unique success. And so with that, my attitude started changing, and I started looking at the past and my past angst, and I said to myself, that's the past. I'm just going to use the lessons that I learned from that and move on with my life. And that was also when I decided that I was never going to hate people ever again. It dawned on me that, hate hurt me more than the people I hated. And it was like me drinking a cup of poison and expecting the people I hated to suffer. And I was like, why give the people who hurt me in my past that power over me? I want to be free. I want to be happy. That's what I want. I want to be happy. So why hate people? That's not going to make me happy. And that's a lesson I still carry to this day. I'll never hate anybody. And that was the first huge lesson I learned when I was 20 years old. This is around the time of 19 going to 20. So here I was with this inspiration of wanting to see my own unique success and see how my gifts how it would become successful. But I was still resentful towards my friends because they weren't giving me permission to go ahead and get it. I wanted them to tell me, Ike, you're cool, you deserve, go and get it. That's what I wanted, but I never heard it. And I was still a little resentful because I felt that still in a way the world was still holding me back from being the person I wanted to be. Fast forward several months later, the New Year came around, 5-6 months later. I was home in New York, taking time off of school, taking classes part-time. And New Year's came around, and I remember New Year's being so inspired, and I got a notebook, and I started writing out my goals for what I wanted for the year. And, you know, in the following ensuing days, I just was just so bubbling with inspiration. I was like, oh, I want to get this thing. I want to get it. And finally, I was just like, you know, screw everybody else. I give my own self the permission to get the life I wanted to get. I don't need anybody else's permission. I can give it to myself. And that became the second pillar of the viable alternative, self-appointment, when you appoint your own self the right to be successful. And that got rid of the resentment I had towards the people who didn't give me the permission to be successful. And that also gave me back my power that I had given away starting from the 7th grade to people about them giving me the right to be successful. This was now, self-appointment was my audacity for a person who was called a loser to go and now get the things that were only reserved for cool people. Simply put, it was just about me appointing myself the right to be successful. And so that was when, I appointed myself the right to be successful. And, you know, it was around this time that I started to take action, which is a third pillar, self-discovery, when you take action to go and get the success you wanted. And this is when now I started creating a unique style for myself. This is actually when, you know, if you see me, I love the color gray. Gray is my favorite color. And I look at the color, it just soothes me. And that's when I discovered gray as my favorite color. And that's also when I started wearing earth tone colors. You notice I wear a lot of earth tone colors because I feel it fits my whole look, my color, my whole vibe. Earth tone colors fit that for me. And that's when I discovered it then. And I started creating my own unique style for myself and how I want to look like, and or what I want to look like rather. And slowly but surely, and also I started thinking differently. You know, I remember I started like embracing the words. My mom used to tell me I was the best and deserved the best, and I started embracing that. And sure enough, my life started to change. I started becoming a successful woman. Whenever I would picture something I wanted, it would come into fruition. But also, when I would watch my friends successful, I would see them successful and I would imagine myself having that same type of success. When I saw them exuding certain qualities of themselves, I imagined myself exuding the same qualities. When they would have these successful scenarios and they'll tell me about it, I say to myself, I deserve that to happen to me as well. I deserve that. I'm worthy of that, you know. And then I'll also imagine my own scenarios of me being successful and me explaining my success stories to my own friends. I'd imagine my own qualities and how I would exude my own qualities in these success scenarios. I would totally put myself in a place of success. And like I said, my success started to materialize, which is now the fourth pillar, the self-actualization. And to explain, like I said, I started getting a successful woman to the point that I started having situations happen to me that my own friends I looked up to would say, wow, you know, that never happened to me before. And random people would say hi to me in the street that I didn't even know. They'd be like, oh, what's up? I remember the big club back in the day was Limelight. And I remember going there one night and some random promoter would be like, yo, you want to get him free? And he gave me his his number and said, yeah, whenever you want to be in a guest list, call me. And I was getting him free from Limelight. I remember going to stores and random cashier would be like, yeah, I'll give you a discount, you know, because I just felt like it, you know. And just like my life totally, completely changed to the point I looked back a year previously to when I was depressed in my dorm room, suicidal, thinking my life was over because, you know, there's nothing worth living for. And it was just like a different world. And I looked and I said, wow, I felt like a totally different life. And that around that period was when I wrote that poem, The Parallel Path. It was because, again, now you know the background of what led me to write that poem. It was just because I just realized it was just such a shock to me that I can go from where I was to where I am now. It was just like I would sometimes pinch myself. I just couldn't imagine that someone starting as low as I did came to the point where I was. You know, it just was unimaginable. And I just had like this positive outlook towards life. Fast forward several months later, the following year, I returned back to my old school after taking a year and a half off. And again, it was like a different school and a different person, different school. It was like that person I was for the first 2 years. I couldn't even fathom being like that. It was just a different time in life, and that was what it was. Uh, so fast forward that I finally got my very own girlfriend, and that kind of culminated everything that I wanted from being 12 years old, having my very own girlfriend, and it was just like like almost like I felt like the completion of what I set out for in the beginning. So the question is now, did I ride off into unicorn, um, into the rainbows with angels singing songs? And the answer is absolutely not. Um, a year later, um, the girl I was with left me and dumped me, and I was completely devastated. And that started another weird period in my life. And I'll tell you why, because frankly speaking, all this stuff I created myself, I'll tell you, I was a complete idiot. I was stupid. I was young, and I basically based my whole sense of self on my looks and how many girls you can get and blah, blah, blah. So yes, I was a complete idiot. But the framework of the viable alternative was basically set. The problem with the whole path I had taken was that, there's the whole story of the goose that lays the golden egg. I was focused on the egg, not the goose, because I had no sense of self. My sense of self was external things. And so I was focusing on things that emanated from the core of who I was. Like I said, gray. Yeah, I love the color gray. That emanates from my essence. But I was focused on this trivialities on the outside instead of who I was on the inside. And so, of course, and then also think there was a guy who used to follow people around to be accepted by them. Think about like what type of damage a person has within them to do something like that. And if you don't deal with that damage, whatever structure you build on top of that is going to bring it down and cause it to implode. And that's basically what happened to me. My life imploded, and I went into a weird period of my life where I kind of threw the baby out the bathwater. I was devastated by the breakup. And then from the devastation, I was depressed for a little while. And from there went the guilt. And I basically looked back at the entire life, and I threw away the whole baby with the bathwater. And I thought I was a terrible person. And that, again, started weird years in my life. And the 2000s that ensued after that were a complete debacle, where I had no sense of self. I was constantly trapped in my head, and I was completely nervous, stiff, and stifled. I had almost a non-existent dating life, and it just really was a weird decade of my life. But interestingly enough, through the mid decades, I think it was like 2004. I was also modeling. I started modeling, and as a model, I want the whole thing is to get accepted to an agency. And because I don't have the mainstream look, and my look is more ethnically ambiguous, I had problems getting accepted at an agency. And they would tell me I was too big, or blah, blah, blah. I'd have a commercial look and this and that. So, I was forced to think about how can I make it. And so that was when I said, you know what, I got to do this in my own unique way, in my own unique path. And that was when I actually coined the phrase, the viable alternative, and said I was going to make it as a model using my own unique way, using my own internal resources and treasures to create the life I wanted. That was when the whole thing came into actual fruition, and I formed the pillars and the principles of the viable alternative. So 2004 is when it started, but like I said, I had a ton of problems. 2007, I had started my spiritual cleansing, which is another long story. I'll get into another time. 2009, a huge spiritual cleansing, and that period of my life lasted from 2007 to 2012. And then after that, 2 years later, I started something called body-oriented therapy, and that was when I started really addressing the issues I had, culminating to the person who was following kids around trying to be accepted by them. And I've been now in therapy for 2 years, and the therapy consists of healing my past pain, emotional wounds, and trauma. And I can tell you that now is really now when I'm getting an idea of really what the viable alternative is. I said the first pillar of the viable alternative is self-realization. In the past, I had no concept of self. But now through my healing and removing of the blocked emotions and being more in my body and stopping running from my pain, I'm really now starting to really embody the self that connected to my core. And in doing that, I'm really now on a visceral level connected to myself, and I'm understanding now what really is about surrendering and allowing myself to express the uniqueness I have within. So really speaking, it's just been kind of like a process, but now this is more just concrete because it deals with the core of who I am rather than my mental concept of who I might be based on the illusion out there. And as I embody myself, I will now, as I embody myself and heal, it's coming to a point now where I'm taking back my power, because the real issue about me not pointing myself the right to be successful is I had given that power to my father. Because, we all have a wounded child within, and it's not coming. My process is letting my wounded child trust me instead of my father, who was emotionally abusive, but to trust me, myself, and then trust me to give me the permission to be great. And this is just a whole process. So now I'm really experiencing the viable alternative for the inside out rather than the outside in. So this is my story, and I'm sticking to it. I hope that you gained wisdom and insight from my story, and it's still ongoing. I'm still work in progress, and I will be so to the day I die. And I hope that you can gain the wisdom and insight from this story to use in your own path to greatness, to your own unique greatness, to live in the viable alternative. If you want to subscribe, please subscribe. You can also follow me on Twitter, The Viable Alt. And again, you can go to my site, www.theviablealternative.com. So thank you for listening. This kind of went a little longer than I wanted, but I hope that now you can gain an understanding of how I came into the viable alternative. And I'll see you and talk to you guys later. I'm going to be coming, I think, with a third part where I'm going to give you historical examples of when the viable alternative has historical examples of the viable alternative. Take care.